Hey everyone, Rayori here. First off, I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season and a great new year. Recently, I've been trying to stray away from making too many serious videos, and that's mainly because I want to try incorporating different elements to the content on my channel. But over the break, I sat down and watched one of my favorite anime films of all time for the 6th time, and that film is 5 Centimeters Per Second. Right off the bat, I do want to let you all know that this isn't really a review nor a recommendation per se, but just a personal analysis or exploration of the film and its impact on me as a person. I discovered this film while I was still in elementary school, and was more infatuated with the cool fight scenes and the pretty colors that anime had to offer. Shows that had resonated with me at the time ranged from SpongeBob SquarePants and Power Rangers to Naruto and Bleach. So I've always wondered what exactly it was about 5 centimeters per second that drew me to it like a magnet. Now, of course, in my youth, I was fairly oblivious to the concepts of love, distance, and relationships as most children are, which are key focuses that 5 centimeters per second focuses on. So you can guess that I didn't understand what the film was about. You could also assume that I was very much into the way the film looked because, my god, the film looks absolutely amazing to this day. As I got older, every single time I rewatched this movie, I thought back to my youth, and it was then I realized why I grew so attached to the film. Despite my age and very contrasting interests between the film and me, I absolutely fell in love with it. And it honestly was because of the way the film looked. You see, even if you understand very little about what the film is trying to convey, if it's done well, it can still evoke some kind of emotion with just its visuals. If you look at films like Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush, there's no dialogue in it, but the visuals, the acting, and the music made people laugh, cry, and even cheer. 5 centimeters per second did just that for a very young Rayori. The quietness of the film, the colors, the characters' faces, the music were all things that culminated in an ever-growing interest towards the film. Nevertheless, I went about my life and finally finished elementary school and moved on into the strangest years of my life. I can't say middle school were filled with many fond memories. Of course, there are a few, but those are years I try the hardest not to reminisce. During this time in my life, you could say that I was extremely emotional, and you could say that it was due to a lot of different factors. First of all, I was going through an undocumented phenomenon known as puberty. Plus, I had a lot of personal issues that revolved around my family going on at the time, as well as the passing of my grandfather. Now, despite these negative events, I still tried to live out a fairly fun and active middle school life. While I didn't attend clubs or participate in any sports, I made a few friends here and there, and for lack of better words, ended up falling in love a little too hard at the time. So, how does 5 centimeters per second tie itself into this mess? While nearing the end of my 8th grade year, I had gotten over a lot of stuff and was really just done with all the crap that life had put me through for the past year and a half or so. As I was just browsing through some shows on Crunchyroll, I stumbled across a movie that I had forgotten about for over 2 years. That film being 5 centimeters per second. Even though I had forgotten about the movie for some time, I was still drawn to it and had very fond memories of it. So I decided to sit down for about a little over an hour and watch it. After the film ended, I couldn't do anything but just sit there and stare at the replay button for a couple seconds. And as hard as it is to admit this, eventually I started crying like a baby. However, I had never felt as good as I did at that moment, because I felt like I was letting out all my frustrations and troubles out in that one split moment. At the time, I had really only explored the film's very surface, a story dealing with love, distance, and relationships. And remember when I said that I fell in love a little too hard? Yeah, it was a very one-sided love. And a large portion of the film really explores that feeling of never really being able to be with someone that you wanted to be with, and it was the film that helped me accept that feeling. With that in mind, the film also pushed to demonstrate just how things don't go the way you want them to. The idea there's so many things that are out of your hand that you can't control is just very apparent. And with its very bittersweet ending, 5 centimeters per second taught me two of the most valuable lessons I could have learned in my middle school years. and those lessons were about love and realizing that the world doesn't revolve around me. That was my first time watching the film as a middle schooler, and my third viewing total. I learned something more about the movie, and it managed to teach me a few lessons that to this day couldn't have been taught better. I would go on to rewatch the movie 2 more times through my high school years, where I honestly went on believing that what I had learned prior was all there was to the film. I think it was a few nights before Christmas when I decided to watch this movie again. I don't really know what drove me to want to see it again, but I did. It was a bit nostalgic for me, because I was watching the movie the same way I watched it that night as a middle school student. In my room, late at night, and silent. As the film loaded up, I recalled back to a lot of stupid stuff I did in middle school, and I really realized just how close-minded I was. But the moment the film started, I immediately stopped thinking about those things, and just like the other 5 times I watched the movie, I was entranced by it. When the final scene with Takaki, Akari, and the train finally ended, I began to view 5 Centimeters Per Second as a different film. Now, again, I watched this film after a period of time where I hadn't thought about the movie all that much. So essentially, I was watching the film after living for a bit longer and experiencing and going through a lot of new things. I think we can all agree that 5 Centimeters Per Second on a very basic surface level is about love, distance, youth, and relationships. But up until this point, I never knew that the film was really about growing up. It never dawned on me just how crucial the way the film was paced played a role in trying to convey a much deeper and much more relatable message that I think many people often don't realize. We follow a character from his childhood to his adulthood. Through his growth, we see him live life while struggling with a lot of emotions that everyone feels at one point or another. We really only see him be truly happy 2 times in the film. Once in the first arc, and once in the final shot of the film. Since the first arc takes place during their childhood, it conveys a message that, during our childhood, it's easy to feel like we're living a carefree life with no responsibilities. But as we get older and start to develop knowledge, things just slowly begin to weigh us down. These things can vary from person to person. It can be something as simple as studying for a test, to family troubles, and even personal issues. In the film, these hardships come in the form of love, distance, fear, longing, sadness, and almost every other emotion you can think of. It does this because it wants to convey that everyone goes through these things at one point or another. Now, on the other hand, the entire second arc of the film really explores that feeling of longing. It portrays Takaki's longing for Akari as well as Kanae's longing for Takaki. But it isn't only longing in the sense of unrequited love, but also in longing for an uncertain future. Visually, the scene where the rocket is launched into the unknown conveys this message fairly well. However, an overlooked example is the transition from the second arc to the third arc. This is because it follows a major jump in time, leaving this sudden gray area that nobody can ever be certain of. In the third arc, it immediately cuts to Takaki, who is clearly unsatisfied with his life, but we have no indication as to why or how he got there in the first place. This intentional time skip conveys a message of not knowing what's beyond all those hardships and baggage that every person carries through growing up, and it kind of paints a very depressing future. But throughout this arc, we skip to flashes of Takaki and Akari, who are living 2 clearly different lives. Takaki a one of struggle and Akari a one of happiness. This is important to realize because it's a clear juxtaposition between 2 people with different personalities, goals, and ideals who have shared a very similar hardship. It clearly conveys the idea that even though similar hardships can happen to people, there's always the possibility of finding happiness somehow. So the rest of the film plays, and then we end up back at the final scene. Takaki, Akari, and the train. When I was young, I always took this scene at face value and said, oh, he's letting go of his love for Akari. But as I watch it now, I realize that it isn't just about letting go of a lingering love, but letting go of all the hardships, the struggles, the frustration, and everything in between up until this point in life. The element of uncertainty is introduced as a scary thing, but in reality, the film wants us to embrace that uncertainty. When Takaki feels as though he's passed by Akari, he looks back with that very feeling of uncertainty and waits. And when the train finally passes and nobody is there, he faces away from the train tracks with a smile and takes a step forward into that uncertain future. As I spent many years rewatching this movie time and time again, I followed a growth of a character from his time as a child to his adulthood, and in that sense the film explores a very human aspect as it genuinely explores a range of different perspectives and stages of what could be anyone's life. And at the end of it all, it leaves along with all its other messages the one I think is the most important. We all go through a lot of shit in our lives whether we like it or not. A lot of things are out of our control and stuff happens for better or for worse. More often than not, we end up carrying that weight with us with all sorts of differing feelings, along with a feeling of uncertainty as to whether or not our past will ruin our future. However, we fail to realize that in order to really move towards a future where we can be happy, we need to let those things go. Not with remorse, but with understanding. It isn't going to be easy, the film clearly demonstrates that. But when it happens, you can move forward in life and trek into that uncertain future with happiness. 5 Centimeters Per Second is a film that has grown with me, and I think will continue to grow with me. It has and always will remain one of my favorite anime films of all time, but the reason that this film will always be such an important thing to me is because of everything that it has managed to teach me throughout my lifetime. I know this isn't usually the kind of video that I would make, but I really wanted to share my experiences with this film. Please do keep in mind that this is my interpretation of the film and that other people might have completely different thoughts on what they got out of the film. This being one of my favorite anime films of all time, I would love to hear other people's thoughts and experiences with 5 Centimeters Per Second, and I encourage you to write your thoughts. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you all in the next video.